He's a host on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, also a host of the Locked On Browns podcast, talking everything Cleveland Browns. I want to welcome to the show, Garrett Bush. What's up, Garrett?
What's up, my brother? How you doing, man?
Pretty good, man. How you doing this evening?
Hey, man, I can't complain, man. Just glad to be on with you. Come on last week. We're supposed to do this. I was a little under the weather. I was ill. You was gracious enough to offer an extension and come back this week. So really excited to talk with you and talk a little Browns, whatever you got going on. So appreciate it.
Yeah, let's get right to it, Garrett. So we got to start off in Cleveland with the DeShaun Watson situation. And, fans are upset with Watson because, this team is a true Super Bowl contender, this season with DeShaun Watson at the helm, but they can't focus on football because they don't know if he will be available this season. So the question here is, are fans upset with DeShaun Watson because of this scandal that he's going through right now? Or are they just happy to know that they got a franchise quarterback, who can win them a Super Bowl in the future, even if it's not this year?
It's a little bit of both. There's some people, they're kind of up in the air and they don't really like the allegations. They don't like some of the stuff that's come out in terms of the way what he was doing in his actions with some of the allegations with the lawsuits and the civil suits. And those individuals have been loud and vocal about their idea that DeShaun Watson shouldn't be on this team and that DeShaun Watson actually shouldn't be in the league. There are people who have that opinion, but there's also people that are in the game for strictly football, in the game for strictly rooting for what's best for the Browns. And those individuals, they have embraced DeShaun Watson being here because, to be honest with you, gives you an opportunity to do something that past quarterbacks haven't, which is win a Super Bowl for the Cleveland Browns. So there's a little bit of mixed emotions on both parts. There's some people in varying degrees on either side of the fence on this whole topic. But when you look at DeShaun Watson, one thing that can't be disputed, he gives the Cleveland Browns an opportunity to be a team that can compete for a playoff run, compete for a Super Bowl, and compete for titles as long as he's here.
Absolutely. I agree with you 100% about that. A couple weeks ago, Judge Sue Robinson, she gave Watson a 6-game suspension. And in her ruling, she said Watson did, in fact, violate the league's personal conduct policy. The NFL recommended Watson to be suspended for an entire season at the very least. And so, I came on my show, and I said that the NFL was in a lose-lose situation, Garrett, because on one hand, if you appeal the suspension, you're undercutting Judge Sue Robinson's ruling and going against the entire process of bringing in a third party to hand out discipline for players. But on the other hand, if you don't appeal the suspension, and you got women in these women groups and, female activists will say the NFL don't care about women and their rights, and you could possibly lose some sponsors. So I think the NFL, they heard the public outcry, so they ended up appealing the suspension. Do you believe they made the right decision?
I don't think they made the right decision. Let's be clear. You're not going to be able to appease everyone. You're not going to be able to, make everybody feel like you got the best outcome in a situation, especially when you're dealing with the type of allegations that DeShaun Watson has. But I would like to say those are allegations. And some of the information that has come out gives you pause a little bit to say, okay, well, some people got a kind of a foggy story. Some people have been inconsistent from the beginning in the depositions, not to mention that, he was never indicted for any crimes or anything. The grand juries failed to bring that to a court of law. But at the end of the day, people keep saying, oh, well, that doesn't mean that he hasn't done anything. It doesn't mean that he's innocent of anything. It just means that they chose not to bring the case forward. When I can understand that, what we're talking about is the process. If you are collectively bargaining and agreed upon a process, then if you're going to take what Sue Robinson says in terms of if or not he broke the conduct policy, if you're going to take that and use that for your argument as proof to why you want to do what you want to do, then you also have to take the other part that she says. And she also says that you have not been consistent in levying your punishments when it comes to players and owners. She also said you're not consistent in terms of giving fair notice of the severity of the treatment. And also you have been egregious in the way you go about legislating your cases by trying them in the court of public appeal. So at the end of the day, if you got to take one, you got to take the other. And the thing that the ultimate takeaway was what her suspension recommendation were 6 games. You can't have one without the other. You got to take either going to take one of the recommendations or one of the aspects, or you're going to take none of it.
Yeah, I agree. And Garrett, I'll openly admit, and I made a Facebook post about this, that I'm torn on this situation involving DeShaun Watson because, on one hand, I want to believe he's innocent. If it was 1 to 3 women, then I would be like, okay, maybe they fabricating this story. They're lying. But I mean, it got up to 25, which is insane. So it's kind of like, man, it's hard to believe 25 women would lie. But like you said, he wasn't indicted. So I'm like, well, if he wasn't indicted, that means they didn't find enough evidence to indict him on federal charges. And so that's what made it complicated for me, because it looks like it's a he said, she said situation, Garrett. That's what I feel like. And honestly, that benefits DeShaun Watson because it's a he said, she said situation. But I also feel like DeShaun Watson has to have better judgment. You can't put yourself in this type of position knowing that you are a franchise quarterback. At the time, he was with the Houston Texans, knowing that you are a star quarterback in the NFL and knowing who you are. You can't put yourself in these situations and compromise the integrity of the NFL. So I think that was where he was at fault more so than anything else. Whether or not he's guilty, that's something that everybody has a difference of opinion on. But I openly admit to you, Garrett, I'm torn about the entire situation. And it's kind of a he said, she said situation.
And I agree with that. I mean, I think a lot of people are torn on the situation. And that's why I started to go back and do some research and look at certain things. And then things started to come up when you look at what some of the testimonies and depositions that some of the women had. Now, she'll be crystal clear about the situation. Some people say 24 women, 25 women. The NFL only brought cases of 4 women.
Correct.
So when you only bring cases of 4 individuals, actually it was 5. The 5th individual was basically found out to be fraudulent. One of the individuals came forward. She had a family member, which was her son, who said that she massaged DeShaun Watson and she had nothing but positive things to say until she found out there was 25 other people suing him. And so he said,
really? So she didn't change her outlook until she saw the other women.
Yes.
Wow.
And the son came forward and said, nah, my mom did this X, Y, and Z. And she even told me she offered to pay me part of the settlement in order for me not to come forward. Yep. There's cases where there are individuals where there were multiple women who not only were like after the incident, quote unquote, took place, they still went to him multiple more times to do massages and reached out to him via text messages saying how much they looked forward to it. There was one individual who, after he didn't go back for any massages, she reached out to him and said, hey, I know we're not working together anymore, but I believe you're attractive and I would like to see if we can start a relationship. And It's like, and so my thing is, all right, so you got all of these stories and they're right there in the deposition. So why is nobody talking about them? It's right there in the court. It's right there in the paperwork. Also, you got to look at it from a standpoint of this. If these people are saying this against him, if you're going to have to take their testimony, you should also have to take the testimony from the 18 women who wrote a recommendation or wrote a statement saying that they never had any issues with DeShaun Watson. He was completely professional and they worked with him multiple times. 18 women signed that affidavit saying that. Now, if you're going to say 24 is against him, why wouldn't you then say on the other end, there's 24 women that are in this industry who are putting their reputation, putting their business, putting their name behind somebody that says, well, I'll attest for my relationship or business relationship with DeShaun Watson. Here's a written statement. Nobody ever mentions that.
Agreed. And I also thought the timing was also something that was suspect to me as well, Garrett, because it was funny how he played all those years in Houston. All of a sudden, he wants out of Houston. And now we hear all of these sexual conduct policy things that he broke and rules that he broke. It's just crazy that all of a sudden he wants out and all these, allegations comes out about him having sexual misconduct. I thought that was also something that was suspect. And I had my questions about that as well. But yeah, man, again, that situation is something that I'm all over the place with it.
I'll throw this out here just to kind of piggyback that. Well, the Houston Texans were named in a lawsuit too. The Houston Texans have now paid off 30 individuals in this case. So my question is, like I've been saying from the beginning, when is the Houston Texans trial coming up? Every time you mention it, check and see how many people don't have a response for it. But we talking about DeShaun Watson, though. No.
Right.
If me and you were going to a bank, right? If me and you decide to get together and collude to rob a bank, I'm just a getaway driver. If you go in the bank and happen to shoot somebody or happen to go in there and somebody get hurt and they die, not only are you on the hook for manslaughter or murder or armed robbery, even though I had nothing to do with it inside, I was part of the squad.
Correct.
So I'm going to be charged with attempted murder or whatever you get charged with, I get charged with.
Correct.
So my thought process is, if the NFL has these individuals who are under the collective bargaining agreement, they are listed under agreement, they are listed under the conduct policy, and they have also been named and paid 30 people. How can you be going for unprecedented punishments when an organization has already said that they've done the same thing as DeShaun Watson and give him NDAs? How's that possible?
Agreed. The question needs to be asked, when is the Houston Texans organization going to be held accountable the same way DeShaun Watson is being held accountable? And again, because it looks like once he asked out of Houston, that's when everything came out. And now the organization, we no longer have your back anymore, DeShaun Watson. Whether or not he did it or not, we don't have your back anymore. But if you were there while this was all happening, the Houston Texans organization was complicit with DeShaun Watson. So I agree with you 1,000%, Garrett, about that for sure. Now let's talk about Roger Goodell. He came out and he said the league is seeking a tougher penalty on DeShaun Watson. And he said the quarterback's actions were egregious and predatory behavior. So for you personally, Garrett, what do you believe ultimately will be the suspension for DeShaun Watson? How many games will he be suspended this year?
In the beginning, I always said 6 games, right? I said somewhere between 4 and 6 games. And to be honest, that's what the arbitrator gave. 4 to 6 games. 6 games is what came out to be. The league wants more. Roger Goodell's voice is annoying. And there's reason his voice is annoying is because like he has this thing where he tries to be a moral stand-up guy and he just into the integrity of the league. And come on, Raj, you don't even believe that, man. Y'all been trying to defraud people from CTE money for the last 10 years. Yeah. You've been canceling claims. You ask people crazy questions that are homophobic, sexist, racist undertones when you ask people at the combine. Yeah. You say that your teams and your main owners are caught in prostitution stings. Yeah. And you sitting here telling me about egregious behavior? I mean, Dan Snyder is a habitual line stepper. He's always crossing the line. And you admitted out of your own mouth that his workplace was toxic, bullying, unprofessional, and misogynistic against women, right? So all these things have been admitted. However, you see the difference, right? The difference is DeShaun Watson is one of the dudes and he's a worker. Yeah. And the idea when it comes to workers is, hey, you shut up. You better be lucky we got you this money. You better be lucky that you are in the National Football League where you are earning this amount of money. And these rules are not for us. They are for you. And the only reason we care about it is the optics, because we want people to think that we care, even though that's not what the case is. We just want to keep raking in this money. Agreed.
And then you remember when the situation went down with Ray Rice and his wife. He originally only suspended Ray Rice for 2 games. Only 2 games until, remember, Garrett, the video came out. And the public outcry from everyone seeing that video, now you wanted to suspend Ray Rice longer than 2 games. Like, you had Ray Rice sitting there in your office. You saw the video, Roger. Now, all of a sudden, now that the public, and women have seen the video, and women see now, you don't give a damn about women's rights. Now you want to up the suspension on Ray Rice. It made no sense. But then you remember, too, with Big Ben, when Big Ben got accused of rape, he had Big Ben, I think he was suspended originally like 8 games.
It was 6, got to 4.
Then it went down to 4. Like, what evidence did you have, Roger, to go from 6 to 4? What changed in that scenario for you to go from 6 to 4? So, again, like, it's all over the place. And this is the reason why Judge Sue L. Robinson only gave DeShaun Watson 6 games. Even if you believe DeShaun is guilty, the reason why she only gave him 6 games is because the NFL is all over the place when it comes to these suspensions and discipline for players for various different things that happen. But Garrett, let's talk some football. And let's just say that DeShaun Watson, gets suspended for 6 games, even though we know it's going to be more. But let's just say it's the first 6 games of the season, and Jacoby Brissett is the starter. Here are the 6 games: at Panthers, home against the Jets, home against the Steelers, at Falcons, home against the Chargers, home against the Patriots. What do you believe the Browns' record will be in these 6 games, if DeShaun Watson is out?
Well, what you're shooting for, you want to at least be, in my opinion, to get to the playoffs, given how tough the AFC is, you at least want to be 4-2, at worst 5-3. If you get to be 5-1, clap it up. Obviously we'll take that.
Absolutely.
But you want to be in shooting range and close enough that you can get DeShaun Watson to come back. There's obviously going to be some rust. So the first 3, it's not like he's going to just jump off a roof, land in the middle of the stadium, and all of a sudden throw for 350 and 4 touchdowns. That's not it. It's going to take him a little bit of time. And you kind of saw how rusty he was in the preseason game. So
absolutely.
You still want to be in that range of 4-2, 5-3. And if you're there, the schedule gets a little bit difficult at the end of the season, but you upgrade a quarterback. And the goal is, and this is what I've always been saying, the goal is for Kevin Stefanski to be developing these guys so that DeShaun Watson, when he comes back, does not have to be some sort of savior or messiah. He could come back and he could just be a guy that's added to a machine that's running well. And that means I've incorporated more Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt into the running game. I'm more dynamic in my running game where I run in the formations. I have a set formula and a set way that I want to get Anthony Schwartz and speed guys to football. My defense is aggressive. After going after the quarterback, we getting turnovers, and the special teams just button up. If you can get that thing rolling like that, and instead of looking for DeShaun Watson to come back and save the team, you want to add a already great quarterback to a team that's already playing well. And so now your momentum can go up and keep moving, but you don't want him to come back 1-5 and you looking around like, okay, well, we need to win 4 out of the next 6 to even be right. Nah, you know, that ain't what you're supposed to be thinking about and training and preparing your team for.
Great point there, Garrett. Great point. See, I honestly believe they could realistically go 4-2, maybe even 5-1 with Brissett. Like, I'm looking at the schedule. Like, they got the Panthers. They can beat Baker Mayfield or Sam Darnold week 1. Then they got the Jets. The Jets are the Jets. Then they got the Steelers. The Steelers don't have a quarterback. The Falcons are rebuilding. The Chargers is the one game I think they would lose without DeShaun Watson, Garrett, because I think you need DeShaun Watson, to go, throw for throw with Justin Herbert. But they could beat the Patriots in that week 6 matchup at home. I'm not a believer in the Patriots. I don't believe in Mac Jones. So I think they could realistically go 4-2, maybe even 5-1 with the one loss coming against the LA Chargers. So that you say what?
I'm right with you. The New England Patriots, I don't even know who they got at receiver. What running backs they got? They got Mac Jones. They got a bunch of no-name guys. I'm not going to be running around scared just because Bill Belichick. I mean, that's where Kevin Stefanski got to come into play. That's where your playbook come into play. That's how you call your plays and have your team prepared. Because to be truthful, that team and roster is not better than the Browns. And even if you look at the Browns against the Chargers game last year, the Browns was in that game to the very end. That game was an either way game. Chargers got a good squad, but I'll be telling people, there's more than one way to skin a cat. And if the Cleveland Browns had any of these coaches, we would not be signing up to say we're not making the playoffs or doing what? Think about it. If we had Andy Reid, is it out of the realm of possibility that you could go 4-2, 5-1?
Agreed. Like last year, I think DeShaun Watson would have won that game when the Browns played the Chargers. He would have won that game. I think that was the biggest difference. Baker just wasn't able to get it done because Baker isn't good enough. But I think, DeShaun Watson is the kind of quarterback that could have won you that game. But I can definitely see the Browns going 4-2, 5-1 in DeShaun Watson's absence. And, even if they don't get into the playoffs as a team that wins their division, they could definitely be a team that could be a wild card team in the AFC. Now, let's transition, Garrett, and let's talk about the offense. They traded for Amari Cooper. They signed Jakeem Grant, in free agency, who previously played for the Bears. They re-signed offensive tackle Chris Hubbard, and they still got one of the best offensive lines in the NFL. Still got Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt, despite Kareem Hunt requesting a trade. So how are you feeling about the Browns offense?
There's a couple ways you can look at it. The Browns have been hit by injuries, tough. Jakeem Grant out for the year. He was going to be the guy that was going to help the kick return game, special teams game, and the guy that can possibly contribute in the slot as a receiver on offense. He's gone for the year. You also have Nick Harris, starting center, hurt the second play of the game in the first preseason game against the Jaguars. Yeah. Guy that was in the facility, gained 20 pounds, was looking like he was really going to take that mold in that center position from J.C. Treader, who they let go due to cap considerations. We thought that he was going to be a guy that came in and stepped in. He is now hurt. You also have the backup, one of the draft picks who was a rookie, Dean. He just went down and practiced again. He is going for the year for ACL. Isaiah Weston is now gone, a guy that was 6'4", 4'4" guy out of Northern Iowa. He was a project. But at the end of the day, still a guy that could do it. He's gone for the year. We also have, now that we now understand all of those things going on, you still need to get guys acclimated, and you got to get guys ready to go. And your receivers are Donovan Peoples-Jones, who's unproven, Anthony Schwartz, who had a case of the drops, and Mike Woods and David Bell, who have shown some flashes of promise during the camp, have missed large sums of time due to hamstrings and to, I believe, a stress fracture. So if you're looking at it like this, the receiver core, the defensive tackle room, and now the center position are very problematic. I don't know if they're going to continue to go out and get another receiver, but I've been on board saying you can't go into the season with Amari Cooper and just Donovan Peoples-Jones as your receivers, because after Cooper, there's a lot of question marks in that wide receiver room, and they have the framework, right? They got a nice foundation of a house. Now they just need those little pieces to make it a home. Give me my man cave. Let me get my patio. Let me get my grill. You know what I'm saying? The decorations, because they need to fill those in if they want to be competitive with some of these other teams.
Now, did Jakeem Grant, did he just go down recently?
This was like a couple weeks ago. Yeah, about a week.
So a couple weeks ago he went down. Man, that was going to be he was going to be nice for them.
Yeah,
this year and could contribute offensively for them in that receiver room. Now, I know that their coordinator is Alex Van Pelt. He's a former quarterback coach in Green Bay. He had a great relationship with Aaron Rodgers. And if you don't know, Garrett, I'm a big time Packers fan. So Van Pelt, he had a relationship with Aaron Rodgers in Green Bay. And we know Kevin Stefanski is heavily involved with the offense. So specifically, who calls the plays for the Browns? Is it Van Pelt or is it Stefanski?
They'll tell you they collaborate. Kevin Stefanski is a really good guy too. He's really good at saying a bunch of nothing. He make it sound good, right? So he's like, it's a collaborative effort. We get together throughout the week, and me and AVP and the quarterbacks, we get together to put a game plan together. It's collaborative. I just happen to be the guy who's kind of calling out the play, but we've already put the list of plays in. So long story short, whatever he said, Kevin Stefanski's calling the plays. He may defer and ask what you think, but the guy that's pulling the trigger when it's 3rd and 3 in the fourth quarter, and he's looking on that play sheet, he's the guy that's coming up with what we're going to do, what can we cook up, and you live and die with whatever call he makes.
Right. So I believe in order for this team to compete and possibly be a playoff team, Garrett, they're going to have to run the football with Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. I think Nick Chubb is one of the more dynamic running backs in the NFL, and when you have a player of the caliber of a Kareem Hunt, who could easily start on other teams in the NFL, is valuable. It's valuable having that 1-2 punch at running back. The Bucs previously had it with Ronald Jones and Leonard Fournette. The Packers got it with Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. So how important is the Browns' rushing attack to their success as an overall offense?
I agree with this. So I'm going to do this, and I like to tell people this.
Okay.
Yes, you need to run the football, right? But you have to understand something. To give yourself a chance to win at the highest level, it's going to come a point in time where your quarterback, going to have to make a throw. It's going to be a point in time where he got to drop a throw in somewhere. He got to scramble and move and buy some time in the pocket. He going to have to make an audible, a blitz pickup, or do something to get you over the hump at the highest level. If you go back and watch the Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs, one of the best games in the history of the game, in my opinion, you saw two quarterbacks in Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes giving each other blows, haymakers.
Absolutely.
It was like Rocky. You know what I'm saying? Rocky and Ivan Drago. But haymaker, you score, I come back and score. You score, you left me in too much time, I'm going to score again. So these are the type of things that you have to do when you get to that level. With that being said, can you win some games in the regular season running the ball and being creative? Yes, you can. And it's not just running the ball. You have to be creative in the way you run the ball.
Agreed.
You go back and look at San Francisco. They do a great job of saying, you know what? We got Deebo Samuel. We got Jimmy Garoppolo. He might not be able to get him the ball traditionally like other quarterbacks, like if he's a Peyton Manning or Tom Brady or Aaron Rodgers. We got to get him the ball, though. So Deebo Samuel, he might take a step. Deebo Samuel might get the ball on a reverse. Deebo Samuel might just motion and get in the backfield and take a carry. Any way you can do to get him his hands on the ball. They run zone. They run out of the gun. They run all type of different things, variations, in order to make you respect certain things like the little passes to move the chains. So you can do it. I think Kevin Stefanski is going to have to do that a lot. I think he has to incorporate Kareem Hunt more into this offense for it to be more dynamic. And I think he needs to play them at both times because they're interchangeable. And I want those guys to be a constant threat on the defense at all times. So you got to respect the run. You got to respect the pass. Both can block. Both can do a lot of different things. So I think he has to just be creative with what he's going to do with the run game. That'll help out too.
I think tight end David Njoku is an X factor in this Browns offense, Garrett. I think in previous years when they had Odell, they had Jarvis Landry, and they still had Dick Chubb and Kareem Hunt at running back, so many different pieces to get the football to. I think Njoku is an X factor that has gotten overlooked in this Browns offense. And I think you can make an argument that he's a top 10, maybe even a top 5 tight end in the NFL at his best. I mean, last year he played in 16 games. He only had 36 receptions, 475 receiving yards, 4 touchdowns. How much of an impact do you believe Njoku will have, and how important is he to this Browns offense?
There's a lot of people who didn't like David Njoku's contract extension. They point to his production. You just mentioned what his numbers were. And right now, what his contract is, he's getting paid like a top 5 tight end. His production has not been a top 5 tight end or top 10 tight end. However, the Cleveland Browns made a gamble, right? It's an investment. They're banking on the fact that his future returns will be better than what his traditional output has been historically over his career. They're looking at what the offense could be given the fact that they do have a running game. They do have a solid receiver, a solid to good top 15 tier receiver in Amari Cooper, and that you got David Njoku, who's going to be upgraded by the fact that you have DeShaun Watson throwing him the football and not Baker Mayfield. So with all those things going into it, they feel like he's going to be a target, and I think they see him as their number 2 target. You can argue with that. It raises a couple eyebrows for individuals. Yeah. However, people saying after Amari Cooper, you counting on David Njoku to be, this ain't Travis Kelce, this ain't George Kittle, this is not some of the guys who are in this league who have been putting up big time numbers. But I think the Browns are saying he hasn't done it before, but we know what his skill set is. He can stretch vertically, one of the most athletic tight ends in the league. He can go up and high point the ball. He's getting better as a blocker. And we believe that in the future, we're going to be able to utilize him with the offense and the quarterback we have now.
I like Njoku a lot. Again, I think he got tremendous upside, and he could be an X factor in that offense. But let's switch gears. Let's talk about the defense. They are obviously led by defensive coordinator Joe Woods. Still got Myles Garrett, one of the best defensive players in the NFL. They re-signed linebacker Anthony Walker, brought in defensive tackle from Jacksonville, Taven Bryant, added a third safety in Ronnie Harrison Jr. to help that secondary. So, do you believe this Browns defense can be a top 5 defense in the NFL with all of these stars on their team?
Sure. They were top 5 defense last year. They were just coming together last year. They really didn't even have a good year in the first 8 games per se. They came along slowly, and by the end of the year, they was the best part of what the Browns team was. You look at the fact that you have 2 pass rushers, 2 of the most athletic pass rushers in the game, gifted pass rushers, in Jadeveon Clowney and Myles Garrett. You look at the secondary, which to me might be the strongest position on the team.
Agreed.
Watch the preseason game against the Jaguars. MJ Emerson made a heck of a play, taking a pick 6 to the house. AJ Green is an undrafted free agent, really long, athletic, Pro Football Focus grade has him in the 80s, which is tremendous from an undrafted free agent. Greg Newsome looks like he's going to be a guy that's going to be a top flight corner in this league. If you want to know about Greg Newsome, just go back and watch how he played against one of the best receivers in Jamar Chase last year, covering him throughout the field and getting his hands and deflecting passes and defending passes at a high level. And plus you got Grant Delpit, who I believe is going to be an impact safety for the Browns. The Browns haven't had a safety that has been impact, like in the ways of the Pittsburgh Steelers, who have Troy Polamalu, or the Baltimore Ravens had Ed Reed.
Yeah.
And you saw the way those guys patrolled the secondaries all those years when the Browns came back after 1999. And it was just miserable. A safety can really change the way that you play the game. I think Delpit can cover the run. He's explosive in the run game. His run fits, and he's athletic enough to really do what he needs to do in the passing game as well. And then, to me, a guy, JOK, is the new wave of linebackers. Just watch how he just runs sideline to sideline to the ball, stopping the ball. And it's so difficult for guards trying to climb on him to the next level to block him, because he's just out here playing basketball on him. He's like, no, I'm too athletic. You can't touch me. And he's always in the backfield. So the Browns defense is going to have to carry them, especially if DeShaun Watson is out. But the way it's a formula to get into the playoffs. That is limit your turnovers, play solid defense, get turnovers, get after the quarterback, run the football, timely play action passing, and scoring in the red zone and solid special teams. That travels, that's tried and true. And it works every single time. So those are things that the Browns need to do in 2022.
They still got Denzel Ward, too.
Still got Denzel Ward. We forgot about him, right?
Yeah, forgot about Denzel Ward, man. He's one of the best defensive backs in the NFL, and so that's what I want to ask. You kind of mentioned it. What do you believe is the strength of the defense? Would you say it's the secondary with Denzel Ward and Delpit and John Johnson, or would you say it's up front with Jadeveon Clowney and Myles Garrett?
The strength of the team is the running backs. Offensively, it's the running back. Defensively, it's the defensive backfield by far. We forgot about Greedy Williams, who played very well last year from coming back from the stinger neck issue situation. You talk about the fact that you can move, the luxury of having Greg Newsome to be inside. And you got a rotation of John Johnson, Rodney Harrison, and Grant Delpit that are able to do that as well. So I look at the back seven in terms of the safeties and the cornerbacks. They are deep. They're athletic, and I think you'll have an opportunity to see what Joe Woods can do this year. Now that every single person that they had last year is now back in that secondary, it's going to make it easier for him to call and dial up some stuff, confuse quarterbacks, and to stop explosive teams.
Now, they got stars all over the field defensively, but if you had to say the weakness of their defense, would it be the linebackers?
I would say defensive tackle. Defensive tackle to me is the weak position. You talk about Taven Bryan. He never really was anything above a replacement player in Jacksonville. They just got rid of Sheldon Day. They cut him. He hadn't been practicing and playing due to injury. They're expecting something from Jordan Elliott, and he showed some signs against Jacksonville. Jordan Elliott is a guy who they're really high on, third-round pick out of Missouri. And then you look at some of the guys that got Perrion Winfrey is a guy that we're excited about, because just the simple fact of his physical skills and his motor and his mentality. We just got to get him up to speed and get him acclimated and make sure he's in his fits doing what he needs to do. And then down from there, there's a rotation of guys like Tommy Togiai, who played pretty well yesterday, and a few other guys that they are rotating in there to see what their two deep is going to be. You had to ask on the weakness, definitely say on offense it's the receivers, on defense it's defensive tackles.
He's a host on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, also a host on Locked On Browns podcast, talking everything Cleveland Browns. Got a couple more questions for you, Garrett. Who's the X factor on that defense? Like, if this specific player plays well, then the Browns will have a successful season. Who would that be?
Grant Delpit.
Okay.
We talked about him a little bit. The reason why she's so special is because if you go back and watch his junior tape at LSU, Grant Delpit would have been a top 10 pick. Grant Delpit was a guy who he's a missile, he's physical, he can cover, he has, great ball skills. And when you look at it, him tearing his Achilles heel kind of set him back a little bit, almost giving him a redshirt year, his rookie year. Last year, you started to see some of the strides coming along, had a really good game against Minnesota. As you continue to watch Grant Delpit, you started to see that he was getting more comfortable. He was getting some more of that explosiveness back after that injury. And now this year, after training, I've torn my ACL in both knees. So I've had 13 surgeries. So one of the things when you talk about in surgery is, when you have an injury like that of that sort, and it's taking 8 months to 11 months to heal, you're just trying to get back to a baseline of having athletic ability where you could compete and play.
Yeah,
that's not saying you doing something to get better. Everybody else is adding to that. Everybody else is adding speed, adding strength, adding agility. You just trying to get to a baseline where you can go out there and play again. And so The second year is where you see all your growth. All of those traits start to come back because now you're able to train, you're able to work on some of those things. So for Grant Delpit, if the Cleveland Browns can have a dominant safety, I like to say that dominant teams, Super Bowl teams, have a dominant player at each level. You go back and watch the Baltimore Ravens, and you look what they had up front. They had Terrell Suggs up front, right? And Haloti Ngata for a long time.
Yeah.
In that second part, you had Ray Lewis at linebacker. Yep. You go to the secondary, you have Ed Reed. So when you got three levels of dominant players, what that means is there's no weakness. You're going to have to beat me at the line of scrimmage physically. You're going to have to out-execute me when it comes to getting past my middle. And in the passing game, it's going to be an uphill climb because we got playmakers back there too. It is very difficult to do because most likely cap assets and stuff to go after free agents. So you got to develop that. And that's very difficult to develop those three areas, instinctual areas too. I mean, think about defensive end, linebacker, and corner. That's all instincts. Getting to the ball, reading, reacting, and making plays. So it's kind of difficult to do, but you see what you could do as a team if you do have all those three of those levels covered.
Now, I believe in Kevin Stefanski, Garrett, as a head coach. In 2 years, he's 19-14. His career record is he's won 58% of his games. That is with Baker Mayfield, which is very impressive. So how do you feel about Stefanski as a head coach overall? And do you believe he is the right coach to lead this team on a deep playoff run?
First and foremost, I like Kevin Stefanski. I like what he did. I like his cool demeanor. I like the fact that he doesn't seem to ever get flustered or too high or too low. And I like the fact, especially when you go back to 2020, he showed me that what he can do is he can adapt, right? It was very impressive for the Cleveland Browns to win a playoff game in Pittsburgh where their coach was at home in his basement with COVID, with nobody in the stands, right?
And dominated the game.
And pretty much dominated from the snap to basically into the fourth quarter. The game was out of reach. So he showed me a lot, but 2021 leaves some stuff to be desired. I think people will point to the fact that they didn't really like the playbook. We'll go and see whether or not it was the fact that Baker Mayfield couldn't execute the plays he was calling, or was it the simple fact that he wasn't calling them and being innovative enough? So that's what we're going to see. Also, people don't like the fact that you had a guy in Odell Beckham Jr., who you had on this team, who you had probably one of the better receiving cores with him and Jarvis Landry, never was able to get Odell involved. Even under Freddie Kitchens, Odell Beckham had over 1,000 yards. And Kevin Stefanski could never figure it out. And once again, was it the fact that he didn't scheme him open enough to do that? Or was it a quarterback issue?
Correct. So
one thing that happens is we find out real quick because it's a process of elimination in the NFL. At first, you said it was Odell Beckham Jr. He was, he's not vibing with Baker, so they get rid of him. And then he goes out and you see what he did in LA. And so now that's an indictment. Now we come back and say, well, okay, coach, you said he wasn't no good.
Yeah.
And he went out there and did that. So now it's like, okay, you go through the rest of the season. Now you're like, okay, well, Baker, here you go. Here's the football. Baker Mayfield looked terrible down the stretch. Interceptions, bad reads. I get that he was hurt. But guess what? At the end of the day, we look at Baker and say, all right, well, that wasn't good enough. Yeah. So now they get Baker up out of here. Now, process of elimination. You're the only guy left. Now, we're going to see, was it Odell? Was it Baker?
Right.
Or now what you going to do with this team and this roster moving forward? Yeah. So we waiting to see.
He's a host on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, also a host of the Locked On Browns podcast. Joining me tonight is Garrett Bush on Wise Guys Sports on the Worldwide Sports Network. Two more questions for you, Garrett. The Browns missed the playoffs last year, finishing the season 8-9. We know in order to win the AFC North, you got to play a physical brand of football. You got the Bengals with Joe Burrow coming back, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, Joe Mixon in the backfield. You got the Baltimore Ravens. They're going to be bringing back a lot of players who missed last year with injuries. Got Lamar Jackson trying to get a new contract. And then the AFC as an entire whole is tough, man. I mean, the AFC West, all four of those teams, you can make a legitimate argument for them to be Super Bowl contenders. Who do you believe is the biggest competition, though, in the AFC North specifically?
The Cincinnati Bengals would probably be it. I think Baltimore, I like their roster. I'm not sure what they're going to do at receiver. I know what their running game looks like. I know traditionally their defense is solid. You look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they're still looking for a quarterback. They got pieces, Deontay Johnson and Chase Claypool and Najee Harris and guys like that. So TJ Watt, of course. So they got pieces apart, but we don't know who's going to be their quarterback. Trubisky, Mason Rudolph, figured out of Pitt. We don't know which one of those guys are going to take the mantle and be the quarterback. So then it leaves the Cincinnati Bengals. And if you just look at the Bengals, which is the reason why I think the Cleveland Browns moved on from Baker Mayfield. If you watch the Bengals, the Cincinnati Bengals in 2 years, they went from drafting in the top 3 to going to the Super Bowl. And for so long, we've told ourselves in Cleveland that you need to have continuity. You got to have a top 5 player at every position. You got to have receivers and running backs. You got to have the coach and general manager be on the same page for 10 years. You got to have $100 million in cap space, and it got to be sunny every single Sunday when you play. You'd be like, all that to win? They said, no, we're not drafting Penei Sewell, and we're not drafting an offensive lineman to keep Joe Burrow upright. We're going to draft Jamar Chase, and we're going to torch up. And they got Jamar Chase, and basically that was it. And their coach went from about to be fired to now we good to go. They got one of the best receiving corps, Tyler Boyd, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. They got a top 5 back in Joe Mixon. They got a solid tight end, and they got better. La'el Collins is there and off on the offensive line. And they got guys, the defensive Sam Hubbard and the other defensive end they got picked up from New Orleans. They rushed the passer well. Trey Hendrickson and then Jesse Bates in the back 7. So they got a team, and they got Joe Burrow, which is the main straw, right? The it factor. So to me, it's the Cincinnati Bengals. I'm going to see if they can still take a step forward. Sometimes when teams arrive a little bit early, kind of like in the NBA with the Atlanta Hawks, they kind of arrived and showed up on the Eastern Conference Finals a year ago, and then they almost didn't make the playoffs this year. Made it in the play-in game against the Cavs. But usually teams like that can sometimes take a step back. But I'm going to tell you what, it's not going to be easy nowhere. AFC, this is one of the most packed AFC teams in terms of quarterbacks and talent that I've seen. And I'm 41, and I've been watching the game 30 years, 35, 36 years. So they got some stuff going on.
I don't know if I told you, but I'm actually here local in Cincinnati, though, Garrett. So, I'm down here with these big fans. Yeah, I'm down here in Cincinnati. I'm a Packers fan, but I'm here in Cincinnati. And so these Bengal fans are going crazy. And to your point, Zach Taylor was on the hot seat. Before last year, Zach Taylor was on the hot seat, and everyone was talking about how Mike Brown is one of the worst owners in the NFL. And to your point, all it took was for them to draft Joe Burrow, and Joe Burrow came in. He got injured his rookie season, but then last year in his sophomore season, I think he had like 34 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. He was an MVP candidate, and so he's the stabilizer for this Bengals organization. I mean, don't get me wrong. They got nice receivers in Tyler Boyd, in T. Higgins, in Jamar Chase, and they got a dynamic running back in Joe Mixon, and they got some nice pieces defensively. But make no mistake about it, the Bengals would not have been in the Super Bowl if it wasn't for Joe Burrow being on their team. So he's changed the entire culture here in Cincinnati. So I completely agree with you 1,000%. And I think that's part of the reason why the Browns traded for DeShaun Watson, Garrett. Despite all of these allegations off the field, they traded for DeShaun Watson because in order to win a Super Bowl and compete, you need an elite quarterback. And we see all these young quarterbacks around the NFL, Garrett. You got Josh Allen, you got Patrick Mahomes, you got Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow. It's so many great young quarterbacks. And I ain't even got to the average guys that's good too, like Dak Prescott and Derek Carr. They both are good average quarterbacks as well that I believe you can win a Super Bowl with. So I think the Browns, they didn't believe they could win a Super Bowl with Baker Mayfield. This is my second to last question. To that, you say what?
That's a fact. When you talk about why they made the trade for DeShaun Watson, it's because they looked at the landscape, looked around, and said, we've been beaten by the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah.
All these years, Big Ben is like 26-3 or something against them. We got beat to sleep by guys like Andy Dalton and Joe Flacco. And then Joe Flacco retires, they go get Lamar Jackson, and he starts beating you, right? Then you already have the Pittsburgh Steelers. You just got out of the Big Ben regime. And so now the Browns are looking around and be like, I'll be damned if I could wait another 20 years. I'm not going to wait for somebody to retire for me to be good. And then they get Joe Burrow in Cincinnati, and all of a sudden it's 2 years, alpha ACL, and it's a Super Bowl. No, it's almost like back in the day when you had the Americans came out with the Manhattan Project and the nuclear bomb. When they dropped 2 nuclear bombs, right? Everybody else woke up and was like, hold on.
Yeah.
We need to get one of them. If it ain't nothing but just to deter them from dropping that on us, we got to go get one of them. And that's the same way it is with a quarterback. When you look at Russell Wilson going to Denver, what they got in Las Vegas and Derek Carr, they went and got Devontae Adams, Justin Herbert. You could just keep going on down. Josh Allen.
The Rams last year won a Super Bowl.
It makes you rethink your whole philosophy, and all of that 5 to 7 year plan garbage. It went out the window. So they was like, well, we need us one of those. And they went and got one, DeShaun Watson.
Literally went and got DeShaun Watson. So last question for you, Garrett. Give me your prediction for the Browns this year. What would their record be? And will they be a playoff team in the AFC?
It's going to be tough. It all depends on with DeShaun Watson, how many games he's out. If the Browns can get DeShaun Watson back and they can go 5-3, 4-2, just be odd, 5-3. Just say DeShaun Watson comes back and can win 7 games, 8 games. That puts you at 12 wins, right? Yeah. If he can win 6 games, that puts you at 11, right? I would say the Browns will probably win. If they get DeShaun Watson back and he plays, they can get 11 wins, and I think they got a shot to make the playoffs. If they don't get DeShaun Watson back and it's just Jacoby Brissett, they still have a shot to make the playoffs. It's just about like a 15% chance at that point. You need a lot of things to go right for you. You need Jacoby Brissett to play the best career game of his life, best season. He can't turn the ball over. Myles Garrett has to be a defensive player of the year candidate. And Kevin Stefanski's going to have to do his best coaching job of his life. So if you can do those things, I think their ceiling without DeShaun Watson is probably 10 games, 9 games, somewhere in that. And due to the AFC, there's going to be teams that beat up on each other all over the place. So you may get in with 10 wins. You may, depending on how things fall. That's why it's very important that the Browns get off to a good start. And the better start they get off with helps out a lot. But it's going to be an uphill battle. They can make the playoffs, but I only got it at 10, 15% chance if DeShaun Watson's not playing.
Let everyone know where they can find you at on social media and find your show, Garrett.
All right, so you can listen to me every Saturday, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. on the Barbershop. That's in Cleveland, Ohio. You can download the Odyssey app, rewind the show if you miss it. You're out and about every single Saturday, 8 to 12. Coming up season is going to be starting, so I will be doing the Browns pregame show. Check me out. Come on, if you're local in the area, come on out in front of West 6. We'll be doing a pregame show for 92.3 The Fan from 9 to kickoff every single Sunday on home games. If you really want to get to me on YouTube, you can subscribe to the Barbershop channel. I drop videos on there. I just had the DeShaun Watson series on there that's done really well. So check that out. It's just called the Barbershop. You can just search G Bush and find that. Then you could get to the other 2 gigs, Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. That's every single day on YouTube, Monday through Friday. Jay Crawford, formerly of Cold Pizza on ESPN. We got Adam the Bull on there. Brad Sellers, former NBA player, played with the Chicago Bulls. Tavis Powell. Okay. Lots and lots of guests, all those people. That's every single day from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. And then finally, Locked On Browns podcast. You can check that out with me and my co-host, Jeff Lloyd, where every single day we drop a podcast. You can get that wherever you download your podcast. And you can download and subscribe to the YouTube channel, Locked On Browns on YouTube. And that's where we can find me.
He's a host on the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, also a host of the Locked On Browns podcast, talking everything Cleveland Browns. He is Garrett Bush. Hey, Garrett, man, I'm going to definitely bring you on again later on in the season, talk Cleveland Browns. And I appreciate you coming on the show tonight.
Anytime, man. Let me know. You know where to find me at, man. Appreciate it, brother.
I appreciate it.